Best? Oh, there we go. All right, guys. Great to see everyone. Welcome to our panel, Supersonic Money is the new value creation primitive, in the room with us right now. And today we're going to take about very novel primitive. AI has been taking a mind share outside of crypto for many years, and we have seen a wealth of innovation. There's no need to argue that the biggest systematic change in economy, society, and labor market is going to be brought by AI. We have seen also current explosion of use cases amongst agents, operating systems, which have been adopted in blockchain in the Q4. But however, it's still very novel subject. So I would like to take this opportunity today to have a discussion to understand where are we heading, what are the use cases are, and what opportunities could we see arise from this symbiosis between AI and blockchain. So, Soufia, I have the first question to you. You guys been building in a liquid risk-taking primitive, and from your perspective, what do you see are the most prominent opportunities that are arising in the intersection of blockchain and AI?
That's a really good question. I think right now at this stage, there's a lot of exploration that's happening in the sort of cross-section of how AI can help LRTs or restaking in general. Just kind of top of mind, what we've been exploring is this idea of collaborating with different platforms that have AI agents where they can discover RSE for yield. So essentially, you have a lot of farmers out there that are constantly looking for the best yield opportunities. And so having parameters to kind of fit their risk profile and help them better discover yield sources. So as an example, if they're looking to farm certain tokens or like pre-airdrops, essentially they could maybe divert them towards our vault. So again, single entry point towards multiple opportunities for users where they don't have to actively manage their position. I think AI is also going to help us a lot on the AVS front. So essentially, early risk monitoring for slashing amongst AVSs. I do know that there's a lot of risk managers that are currently exploring that right now. So yeah, I think those are the two avenues that I think would be helpful for blockchain AI, or specifically for LRTs.
Thank you. So we've started from, I guess, the top of the funnel. And as we delve in a little bit into the risk-taking, Misha, from the risk-taking perspective, how do you see it will empower the development of the DeFi agents? Is it primarily the agents where you see going to be the first opportunity, or where you see the most demand coming from right now?
Yeah, like it's infrastructure, right? Like we can help with that. You need operators for that. You need verify their actions somehow. Make sure that like the execution environment is what like it needs to be. So yeah, like we have around 6 AI protocols, I think. Yeah, launching with us right now, and yeah, like AI is going to be like agents are going to be really powerful. I think if they can be done in like a safe manner. But I think like every part of the like even internal part of like Symbiotic eventually will be like will be supported by AI in some ways. AI can actually help manage risks for new networks, analyze their tech stack, and like assign some score. It should be like it should not be used like blindly, but this can actually help, because for each network, for each new primitive, for each new slashing mechanisms, like it's gonna be really like a huge lift if we need to like analyze that like manually. And yeah, in terms of like general usefulness, agents are like not there yet in terms of like can they be used in production. But the infrastructure will take like some time to develop, so we need like a novel data availability solutions, because like you need to store a lot of things and have bandwidth somewhere like that is safe. I'm not sure L1s currently like have the I don't know, the characteristics that are going to be permissive for like a swarm of AI agents and like different models. So this all needs to be built. As like I see it, like AI haven't started in Q4 2024. It's going to be started like optimistically in like Q4 2026 or something, but we still need a lot of work to be done before like it's actually realized. And
can I ask, in what way would AI agents be using restaking?
Yeah, well, first, like as any execution environment, you need to like verify that like that the task was done within the parameters that you outlined. Like for trading bots, it might be like the invariants that like you don't like you can never breach. Like say if you're like increasing your exposure to some like tokens or like go to some chain, those like things needs to be checked that you're not like crossing the parameters threshold that you are like designed to not cross.
I would probably even add that you can use AI agents for execution, right? So if you wanted to restake and then use your restaked asset across DeFi, I do foresee a world where that would be possible, and I think they're actually working on it already.
I was planning to keep this question for later on, but I think this is a good time because, all right, but if you think about the use cases, right, and specifically DeFi picked up because there has been some work done on automating market making, treasury management. Those are all great ideas, but as not even a user, but as a fund or an entity which has $1 million at least they're willing to give, would they actually be willing to chuck that money into agent, which potentially could bring systematic risk to the system? And what actually do you think needs to be done to attract more institutional capital? Because I think overall as an industry right now, the big question is how we're going to attract more robust liquidity and more institutional capital.
I mean, I think you basically start with something, and then over time you build and you build and you experiment, and you have a track record, and you start with $100 maybe, and then you go to 1,000, and then at some point there's enough trust based on the track record of the system that you're using. But in terms of restaking, I mean, if you do have a system that's working, you may be able to actually have some type of economic security to basically protect the user's funds from any malicious incident that might happen. Obviously, that would be the case that you don't want to ever see happen, but that's one perspective I would say. But in general, I mean, I think that one of the main things that you have to kind of consider when bringing LLM output on chain is some type of determinism. Like you have to have deterministic output, because when you're thinking of taking, for example, Ethereum or Bitcoin, when you're dealing with everything that's just happening within the system, you have 1,000,000% sure what the output of a certain transaction is going to be. But when you're sending something to an LLM, you have now dozens of different variables. There's just a lot of different variables that determine the output. So you have to kind of now try to figure out how can we make these LLMs deterministic so we can actually have information that's then brought back on chain that we can then use for these types of systems. So in my opinion, it's just kind of going to be, it's just going to take time, and people will build systems that work, and they will have a track record, and you'll see people invest more money. You'll see things go right, and you'll also probably see things go wrong. You might see people get rugged, but people will build trust in the systems that work, and I think those are going to be the winners, and it's going to be kind of a long-term play, in my opinion.
This is very philosophical, but since people can't really trust themselves, do you actually think they will be able to trust the machine? Because if you see the communication which happens in more traditional and like in legacy media, there is a lot of fear mongering. It first was happening in crypto. Now we see a lot of fear mongering happening with DeFi, with AI in general, which tries to send one direction, which has to be very regulated. And actually, I think could crypto first overcome this fear and then also help to bring very successful financial systems powered by AI?
I mean, most trading today is algorithmic, right? So you asked earlier about institutions. Institutions don't trade by sitting in front of a screen and clicking, right? They build a model. The model runs autonomously at, HTS, HFT, high frequency trading. It operates at a speed far beyond human cognition. So there's nothing new about that. Whether or not we will see LLMs play a role in that, I suppose that remains to be seen. But yes, human beings, it's because people don't trust themselves that they would prefer to trust the machine, right? The machine knows. The machine is actually monitoring all of this data. The machine is actually trained, in the same way today, like if you have to participate in a competition for chess where you're playing for money, are you going to play yourself or are you going to get Stockfish to do it for you?
I would have to agree with what you're saying. So essentially, I mean, I don't believe in having AI for the sake of having AI. There are specific use cases. So if we take, for example, on the infra level, so example with like risk monitoring, right? So it's essentially trained algorithms that can detect certain behaviors much earlier than we can. So example, the depegging of assets, which is a very serious issue and it has happened in the past. So should we have these trained algorithms that can foresee the depeg of an asset, prevent that? I think that would be a pretty good world to live in. Actually, there are certain different startups right now that are actually hedging for the depeg of assets like LRTs and stables. I can name a few later, but essentially, so having AI as a source for helping the sort of retail, as an example, find different yield opportunities. I do foresee a world where essentially you would have a risk profile. So this agent isn't just kind of scouting about different yield opportunities. So there's a risk profile. You can set parameters as to when it should stop, if it's reached a certain ROI, how much do you want it to spend, etc. So that would be pretty nice.
All right. In terms of building those opportunities, we've seen a lot of agentic actions, and traditionally, DeFi was existing in the Ethereum ecosystem and Solana. We now see more opportunities arising on the Bitcoin ecosystem. And now that we are entering new era where we have trained agents which going to have opportunity to be completely decentralized and manage the assets. In terms of infrastructure where Restaking exists in Ethereum, now we have new chains incoming. But now we have Turing complete and Turing incomplete cases. So how, given the Bitcoin?
Oh, okay.
Well, because it cannot perform all the computation right now. So doesn't it introduce inherent risk when we start blending those systems prematurely?
Okay, so a few things. The project that I'm working on is called Bitcoin OS, and what we are doing is we're turning Bitcoin, and have already demonstrated much of this on main chain, into a fully programmable system. And the way we do it is by taking any kind of computation, verifying it as a ZK proof, and then writing, verifying, and executing that on Bitcoin. So this isn't your grandfather's Bitcoin anymore. Bitcoin is, over the next course of the coming year, is going to develop the ability to have all of the things that we're familiar with in the rest of the crypto space. So, ZK verification, roll-ups, programmable tokens, trustless bridging opportunities is a big part of what is happening now. AI agents. The opportunity is very, very significant. So, unfortunately, in crypto, we've sort of been trapped with the leftovers of the value in our space. And what I mean by that is, if you take stablecoins out of the equation, Bitcoin represents between 70 and 75% of the entire asset base of the industry. In other words, it's between 2.5 and 3 times larger than all of the rest, all of the stuff on Ethereum, all of the stuff on Solana, Sui, Avalanche, Cardano, and all of that put together is still less than half the size of the Bitcoin asset base. And so the opportunity is very, very significant. And I think right now we're feeling that in particular because we're seeing a dislocation where institutional interest in Bitcoin is surging. Bitcoin itself is continuing to grow and has gone through, 18 months of phenomenal growth, and everyone else is sort of still waiting for their bull market. And just as a simple example of this, if Eigen layer kicked off, the restaking opportunity on Ethereum, I think it was almost 5 years ago now, right? The project started. But 4 years, right? And that has become a significant industry, $14 billion in assets. 2.5 months ago, that was kicked off on Bitcoin, and it already represents close to 7 billion in assets. So it's already 50% of the size and growing faster. So that's phenomenal. And it's because, on a percentage basis, the amount of Bitcoin going into restaking is very, very small, but it just simply, because of the size difference, becomes overwhelming. So I think there's a very, very exciting opportunity now that we have the ability to take what is being built on Ethereum, right, and integrate BTC as an asset base into that. And that's a huge opportunity for restaking projects. It's a huge opportunity for DeFi builders. And it's a huge opportunity for Ethereum itself. And it wouldn't be extremely surprising if we saw, Bitcoin become a much more significant, perhaps eventually the most significant asset in DeFi.
Right.
A bridge would be really nice, like for that. Yeah, like the blocker was for the longest time that like you can't actually safely bridge Bitcoin to Ethereum. And yeah, like if you can figure that out, that would be amazing.
So actually, I think there's two interesting aspects to that. Right now, we have a testnet version of a porting system. We don't even call it a bridge, but the ability to port BTC with cryptographic integrity, right? So effectively what we would, in layman's terms, call a trustless bridge from Bitcoin to Ethereum already exists on testnet. Now, one of the interesting aspects of this is the way that this happens is we now have the ability for Bitcoin to consume ZK proofs of Ethereum and Ethereum to consume ZK proofs of Bitcoin. But it turns out that building a ZK Lite client for Ethereum is very, very hard. UTXO model is actually much better or easier to build a ZK Lite client. And so one of the things that we're currently looking at is using restaking of the very validators who are validating transactions to countersign the current ZK Lite client that exists for Ethereum so that you can get effectively full or very near to the full security that you currently have for Ethereum, also for its ZK Lite clients, and truly have a trustless bridge.
Great.
Right.
But yeah, like the Bitcoin as an asset is really interesting for restaking. But again, like we need some like we don't need to inherit some bad trust assumptions to like the entirety of the restaking space. Otherwise, like it's not going to be shared security. It's going to be like one point of failure.
Absolutely, completely agree. Like I think, one of the unfortunate things that we frequently do in this industry is we're like, okay, here's a great idea. Let's build a caricature of it and launch that first. And so we very frequently get stuck in this environment where we actually have very, very compromised security assumptions. But I think we're getting close to the point now that we will be able to remove many of the trust assumption limitations that have been holding us back from not just in the BTC side, but particularly in the BTC side.
But how would Bitcoin network be able to understand the proofs that are posted on it?
Okay, so I don't want to take up too much space here on a technical explanation, but basically the idea is very simple. In the same way that you can have external compute be verified and executed on Ethereum mainnet, the way you do that like with the ZK rollup, is all of the activity in the ZK rollup gets proven as a ZK proof, written and verified on Ethereum, right? So I think we all know that that can be done with Ethereum. The big thing is it wasn't clear that you could do the same thing on Bitcoin. In fact, even we, until a year ago, thought that you would need a fork to fork Bitcoin in order to introduce that capability. What we demonstrated in July for the first time was the ability to utilize ZK verification on Bitcoin without a fork. So Bitcoin is now already able to verify ZK, and what that does is it gives Bitcoin the ability to actually see activity occurring in another chain.
Thank you. Now let's, I think it was very, since we have more products which are getting integrated within risk-taking, it's very important to understand how the trust assumption is going to be inherited across the chain and what the risks are coming. So we've touched upon a little bit about the risks which are still exist whilst the DeFi introducing new ways for people to build strategies and generate yield. Nader, Eigenlayer works a lot with universities in the US right now. So this is the opportunity to get the fresh minds and how they view the AI and blockchain combining together. We do talk about DeFi AI a lot, but actually in young minds' head, what do you see people are most excited to build?
Yeah, so we have like a three-pronged approach this year for developer adoption outside of the traditional crypto stuff that we've been doing. So you might notice coming to a conference like this, you often see the same people and have similar conversations, and not as often do you meet just a large swath of brand new people. So we're essentially, as she mentioned, having three separate things that we're doing this year. One of them has to do with universities. So this week in particular, we've actually brought in university students from the top blockchain clubs from all around North America. So we have students from Harvard, from Yale, from Tennessee, from Stanford, from all over the place. And they're basically hacking together. Last week, we were in Stanford doing the Tree Hacks Hackathon. So that's one area that we're doing. The other area that we're doing is AI. So we're going to be doing a lot of things with traditional AI companies and AI ecosystems this year. So I would say AI Engineering Conference, for example, is one really great group of people that are not into crypto at all, and we're doing stuff there. And then we have one other area. But the general question is more around new developers. So all of these things that we're doing are meant to be meeting new developers and talking to them. So the conversations that I've had so far this year with all of these new developers are less trying to convince them anything about crypto, to be quite honest. We want to just explain to them all of the different primitives that exist across software and how they might interop. We talk about cloud, we talk about crypto, we talk about AI, we just talk about everything and then let them come up with their own ideas. And I think the most interesting thing to me really about restaking is that it enables a lot of use cases that are not financial primitives. An example of that is zkTLS. Opacity Network and Reclaim Protocol are two teams that I talk about quite often that have built zkTLS protocols. And they have multiple apps in the App Store, and they even have an app that just hit number 2 in the finance App Store, built on Eigenlayer, built on Opacity Network. The users have no idea that it's crypto running under the hood. It just is using crypto-native technologies to enable something that's really valuable to them. And that's the thing that's really interesting to me. And I think that's the thing that resonates the most with most of these young people, because they're not so crypto-pilled to the point where they just want to kind of like only build for crypto-native people. They just want to build really cool apps and really great software. And if we can kind of find a way to resonate with them, then we've won. And I think that framing, and I think that restaking is a way to bring that around, because there are those sorts of products that you can build that speak to everyone in the world. They speak to these people that are really more, they just care about building good apps. They don't really care that much about crypto, right? So that's kind of our general approach, and it's worked out pretty good so far, but we still have a long way to go. I mean, we have the whole year ahead of us. We're going to expand outside of North America for our next activation, but this one is like North American universities.
It's interesting that AI brings more questions of whether blockchain is just going to be commoditized moving forward. And do you think, Misha, question to you, actually specifically for new financial primitives and the way how people invest, how they operate, first, restaking help to reduce the cost of building those new agents and new applications and AVSs, and how do you see that synergy actually kicking off?
Yeah, as long as we have demand, it should be simple enough. Like most protocols currently don't have like the full, there's nothing to pay for. Like you don't have the full feature set that people actually need to like launch safe networks. But like Eigen layers come into a party. Like Babylon is launching in a few months with like with full functionality, hopefully. Like currently we don't have any math on that. There's almost zero AVSs with rewards, as far as I know. Networks on our side, we have like a few that are paying, but like still early days. Like once they get feature complete, once they like actually have the UX part of it, because like builders, like we have a lot of builders already like that are building something for restaking, but the journey is still like only rudimentary better than like before, except of like the optimization of restaking, the actual like SDKs and like I don't know, middleware contracts with different like applications, different slashing scenarios, different protecting mechanisms. They're not like anywhere near ready. So 2025 is going to be the year of actually like shipping. And once we get that, it's going to be like some time before like some economic model for this is going to be born. Like currently Gauntlet and like Chaos Labs and a lot of other firms are working on a risk like profiling for networks, because like the leading thought process right now is that we analyze how risky it is for me to restake to the next network, like N+1 network, and like for that I realize how much yield, like what percentage of yield I need from that network to warrant the risk. And because like almost zero networks have like slashing enabled, it's all zero risk, it's really hard to predict how much they're gonna actually pay. The other like interesting question nobody knows the answers to is like how much economic security do they actually need? Because like we can predict some form like of cost of corruption, right? But it's like for quorum system, it's one cost of corruption. For like fraud-proof interactive, like some interactive proving, like the cost of corruption is going to be completely different. Like you can't even like apples to apples compare them. And because that like the actual applications for shared securities, they cover basically everything that's operated. It's gonna be like some time before like something that is high quality is gonna be born in terms of like framework of scoring. So yeah, like currently like they pay like you just believe in the protocol, you're like you're staked to them and you get like points or something. And there is no like actual framework for scoring those and like trying to like evaluate how precious they are or like how useless they are. It's early days, like we just need to make sure that like we from the step 0 at which we're at, like right, like before that it was like pure marketing. Now we're at a step 0, and like before, like once we go from 0 to like step 1, we actually need to make sure that like we don't fuck up in the meantime. So yeah, like that's the goal. Like at least that's why we are like working on resolvers and trying to like do like stepped security. Like okay, you got slashing, but it might be like not a valid one. Like let's create a safeguard for that, because you need to be extra careful and like have like training wheels all over your body, just for you not to fall like before you actually deliver some value.
I think it's very interesting because we have started talking about decentralized financial systems, but the reality is, which we see right now, you have certain attempts, and also we have chains that are start building designated for AI. And I think one of the things is compute and just the resourcefulness. And I think this is going to be more of very one-on-one question, but do you see with restaking, could there be opportunity of reduction of cost to launch the agents, launch more complex AI-driven systems? Nader, over to you.
I mean, yes, because we're already seeing a lot of these decentralized like cloud providers building services that are using economic security through restaking, like Hyperbolic, Aether, and there's maybe a dozen others that are out there. And some of the techniques of just using idle compute have reduced compute cost by as much as 10x. And with that, though, there are some trade-offs. So I don't believe you're going to get the most performant inference from one of these networks versus building something centralized. So I think it just depends on what you need. So if you're building an agent, you don't really need that like 10, 50 millisecond latency. You can have a little bit more, room to work there. So it kind of just depends on what you're building. But yeah, I definitely think that these types of systems can bring costs down because we're already kind of seeing it.
So I'd like to try and draw a picture out here of why you would even need AI to connect with restaking. And so maybe a good way to start is why you don't need restaking for AI. So thinking about what these AI agents are, they represent an agent for a specific person or a specific company, right? They are inherently centralized. And so you actually, in most of the ways that we're talking about AI agents today, you don't need any staking or restaking at all. You've created your own agent, you send it out into the world, you say, look, I'm going to relax today, you go out and work, come back, bring me some money. Where it starts to get more complicated, in my view, is where you're training. So training these systems for large organizations is probably something you do internally. But for a huge swath of people who are not institutional traders, they're going to need to band together in order to train these systems. And that training of the system is an extremely delicate challenge. A great example of this is Grok 3. If anyone saw Grok 3 over the last few days, over the last week since it was released, it's just another one of Elon Musk's children that hates him, right? It was completely unaligned, completely woke. It does not behave the way that he wants it to behave. And that is because of the selection of training data that was provided and the way in which that training data was reinforced. And so what I expect we're going to see is we're going to start seeing the emergence of collective efforts, to build AIs which are aligned around specific purposes for a specific group. And at that point, that's where restaking starts to become important, because you need to be able to validate the data and the decision making. Really, it's the decision making around the data and the training that is occurring sort of pre-launching the system into the world, or on an ongoing basis training it. So it's not the agent itself that is likely to require the restaking, but rather the preparation, creation, or development of the agent.
Yeah, maybe just to kind of add more color to that, I don't think this is a conversation, at least for me, about whether AI is going to replace restakers. But I can think of a few examples where I think AI would be very useful on the Kelp front. So as an example, for our vaults, for every vault, we have an SM, strategy manager, that essentially hedges across multitude of DeFi opportunities, so lending, DEXs, etc. I could very much foresee a trained algorithm that could possibly replace that. I think there's always room for sort of like that human sensibility. Obviously, like as an example, if we were to allocate a certain portion of our TVL from vaults on a stable coin that happens to depeg, that's not a good thing. But let's say, for example, that there was like a risk monitoring tool that we used that had AI that was able to predict that great. Usually it's on the founder level. Let's say if there are other circumstances that are not technical, if you have some awareness of external parameters, that's something I think that AI cannot solve for. But having a mix of both would be interesting. That technology does not exist yet, but I could very much see having, for example, automated vaults with specific hedging strategies via AI.
Right. Before we move to our final question, is there, especially on DeFi strategists, any of our panelists would like to add something? All right, guys. I think with this panel, it's always challenging because we're talking about something which is quite far away in the future, and we're definitely seeing this trend. As always happens with crypto, people find something new, they get a little bit familiar with it, and they get very excited. And then when they start realizing how complex the actually path is to see outcomes and to achieve results, both it's been, and we talked about it last year in restaking and AI, there's still a lot of very long road ahead of us, and that's exactly the reason I wanted to, more than anything, see where we are right now and tackle your brain on what actually is happening with AI and blockchain and what the opportunities are. And we'll most likely kind of try to have a crystal ball around us right now. So let's look at the crystal ball, I guess. And my final question to each of you would be very simple. Where you see in the 2025 the biggest opportunity could potentially arise in the synergy between AI in general and blockchain?
Yeah, I think that we've discussed this at length already. I honestly can't think of anything else. To your point, I think it's very early, it's very exploratory, and the question begs is not having AI for the sake of having AI, but for actual practical use cases. In terms of how we're viewing 2025 for Kelp is obviously growing our TVL. We hit a big milestone back in December of 2.3 billion, and that was largely as a result of having vaults and no longer completely relying on retail, which is a novelty in the space. Yield. So just creating more yield-bearing opportunities for our users across DeFi, exploring new ecosystems, helping them bootstrap liquidity. So that is how we view 2025.
So I'm going to give maybe what is a spicy take. My background, and actually the way I got into this whole space, was in 2011, I was at Carnegie Mellon working on machine learning and neural networks. I was basically the front runner to AI, and I read the wrong white paper by mistake. I read the Satoshi white paper, and it took me, screwed up all my life plans. I've been desperately looking over the last few years for a connection between crypto and AI, and frankly, I think the connection is very, very weak. We don't really need it. The whole point of AI is it's this agent, this computer that works for you. It's not decentralized. In the same way that you don't want to decentralize yourself, or you don't want, your wife and your mother-in-law telling you what to do. You don't want other people telling your AI what to do. That said, I think there is one way in which crypto connects to AI in a extremely profoundly significant way, which is this. Right now, we're seeing the emergence of a huge amount of artificial intelligence. This artificial intelligence is being rapidly commoditized. What initially looked like maybe there would be one or two companies that win, it's definitely not looking like that's the situation right now. It's looking like Meta are fighting Grok, are fighting the entire Chinese government, are fighting Claude, are fighting OpenAI, etc., 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 etc. And so the intelligence itself is being commoditized. So when you have an environment where you've got massive productivity gains, the question is, where are they going to be captured? And I don't think that the AI companies are actually the place where they're going to capture the gains, the productivity gains to the market from AI. They're just too commoditized. In just the same way that electric companies haven't captured the gains from electrifying our society. I think what we're going to see is that the place that captures the massive productivity gains we're very likely to see is going to be that place where there is scarcity. And the place where there is scarcity, the industry that creates scarcity, that's our industry. That's crypto, and in my view, particularly Bitcoin.
So do you not think that inference will be important to have on chain? I mean, I use inference for almost all of my
100%
work.
no. You're absolutely not going to be doing inference on chain.
I definitely disagree with that, especially with DeFi, because when you need to have high performing, I would say just random applications that are doing trading autonomously, you need to be ahead of the curve and you need to be able to process
Sure, but
a
I
lot
mean,
of,
but okay, you've got a chain that you can observe the transactions on the chain, and you do the inference on a GPU or a Grok CPU system, right? And that's where you do the inference. The inference is done on a computer that sits outside of the chain.
you can only do, I would say, deterministic computation within a traditional like blockchain VM. What if you just want to throw a bunch of arbitrary information into an LLM, get an output, and make a buy or a sell based on that information?
So
In my opinion,
that's
is
exactly what you have verifiable compute for.
Ex-
So
exactly.
today every
with verifiable inference.
yeah. So okay, so today every single T100, T500 that's coming from NVIDIA has a trusted execution environment inside of it, so it can attest to the computation. Do not need a blockchain for that. You can do it without the trusted execution environment, utilizing ZK proofs and verifiable compute, utilizing a ZK VM. Do not need a blockchain for that. None of this stuff is going to happen on a blockchain. A blockchain is an extremely slow, expensive way of doing compute. You're not going to do high process, a high throughput GPU compute through it.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I'm not saying that's exactly what I'm saying. You don't need to actually do the compute on chain. You're making off-chain events, having the computation done off-chain, secured by economic security, and then brought back on-chain in a very performant manner. That's kind of my general thoughts. At least that's where we're seeing a lot of our customers and users like headed in that direction.
I'd be very interested to hear more about that. But it sounds to me like the agents are sitting outside and observing the chain, right?
The agents are sitting outside observing the chain, but the actions that are being taken on chain are done through some type of VM that is still communicating with the outside world via off-chain compute. Therefore, like verifiable inference is like part of that system. So.
But also you have example of rituals which try to redefine the consensus mechanism and then at consensus level mitigate the computational overload of the chain.
I'm sorry. What is the question, or is that just more like
no,
an observation?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
Right, Misha, over to you.
Yeah, like the job of a founder of like restaking protocol is really hard. I personally like I can't say anything negative about that part of the woods, but because like I have like actual networks launching on that. But yeah, a lot of it seems like just extra steps without like any additional value added, especially the inference one. Like I expect, like I heard like really good ideas about how to use agents. None of them is trading, because trading can be done like without LLM quite efficiently. And yeah, like some of those ideas, like they are, it's really important for them to control the training data that is used for training of the model. And like if we can figure that out, and we can control, like create some sophisticated network of oracles that feed those models data that is like somewhat reliable, that might be like a really good value proposition from our part of the woods, because we are already doing that for like a lot of other like applications. But yeah, like super early days. Like I'm mostly excited for, like, I don't know, like the ideas are quite like trading is like closer to than anything from like for actual usability, at least. Like we have like wild ideas, like Avalanche was like trying to like push coin agents or something way before the AI craze. But their tech was that like every person can write a diary. Like I want to deposit money into lending protocol with this like rate and with this LTV, and don't use like smart contracts at all, because like it's all gonna be generated with like natural language. Like the ideas are out there, and like most of them are unusable. But I think like our job is like really simple, just to create an infrastructure for any idea that they need, so they can like do their own playground while being safe. Yeah, that's like basically how we try to think about that.
Thank you very much. It's very simple, but the most important job, especially if we're very excited to see what's going to happen this year. Thank you very much. It has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.